Thank you for joining Power to the Period, Back to School. We have an exciting and engaging night planned for you, and we hope that you leave with a better understanding of the Illinois law around menstrual products in schools and that you feel empowered enough to advocate for menstrual equity after this program. I'd just like to give you a few reminders about Zoom. There is closed captioning available. If you'd like to see closed captioning, please click on the CC button on the bottom toolbar. Feel free to post any questions in the chat during the panel. We'll answer as many as time allows, and we will provide written responses to all the other ones after the event. We'd also like to thank our sponsors. We are super thankful to the Chicago Abortion Fund, Gems for Femmes, Girls in the Hood Foundation, Girls Inc. of Chicago, and the Period Collective for sponsoring this event. Thank you for your support and advocacy to advance menstrual equity in our state. Before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit about myself and She Votes Illinois. I just graduated from Edwardsville High School. It's a little bit away from St. Louis. I grew up volunteering with I Support the Girls, a worldwide organization for menstrual equity, and that's how I was introduced to the topic of period poverty. I found out that my school was non-compliant with House Bill 156 around 2022, and that's when I started looking into political action committees like She Votes Illinois, and I interviewed in 2023, and I've been a member ever since. She Votes Illinois is a statewide political action committee that's committed to making sure that political systems reflect the voices of all women, femmes, and girls. Since 2019, we've led a menstrual equity initiative aimed at ending period poverty, advancing gender equity, improving public health, and upholding the dignity of all menstruators throughout the states. As far as the format for tonight, we'll start with a 40-minute panel, followed by a Q&A, and then close with calls to action. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and we're sure that this is going to be an informative and engaging event. Throughout the evening, we will be asking audience poll questions to gauge your awareness of period poverty. Our first question is, Illinois law requires menstrual products in all public school bathrooms in grades 4 through 12. How often are dispensers or baskets stocked in your school bathrooms? The options are always, often, sometimes, rarely, never, and what dispenser? As we can see, the access varies widely across the state. We ask that the panelists please answer questions with mindfulness of inclusiveness. Not all menstruators are women, and some menstruators are disproportionately impacted. For any questions that we don't get to, we will share responses from some of the panelists in writing at a later date. Okay, welcome, panelists. I'd like each one of you to briefly introduce yourselves. We'll start with Representative Barbara Hernandez.
Hi, everyone. My name is Barbara Hernandez. I'm the state representative in the 50th District. I cover areas of Aurora, North Aurora. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you through Zoom to discuss something that a lot of people feel uncomfortable discussing, either are also embarrassed. And a lot of people don't realize that this is something that is happening here in our hometown, in our state, in our country. Many people think it's happening maybe across the world, but it's happening here in our backyard. So this is very important that we're discussing, and I can't wait to talk more about the legislation that we've been able to do.
Thank you so much. It's so great to have you. Next, I'd like Hamsika Thumu to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm a She Votes Illinois board member, and I'm currently going to be a senior at the Illinois Math and Science Academy. Throughout my work as as a She Votes Illinois board member, I've helped to develop the Illinois Menstrual Equity Handbook and to teach students, parents, and educators about Illinois' menstrual product mandate. I'm also an advocate for women's health, and I research the safety of vaginally applied products. And I'm working towards advancing menstrual equity, and I'm excited to be on the panel to talk more about my work on She Votes Illinois and to teach students, parents, and educators about advancing menstrual equity in Illinois.
We're so excited to have you. Next, I'd like to introduce Sydney Raymond.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney, and I serve as the National Policy and Campaigns Manager for Period. We are a global youth-led nonprofit working to eradicate period poverty and stigma through our three pillars of education, service, and advocacy. So I have the honor of leading our federal and state advocacy work, supporting campaigns across the country, developing legislative toolkits, and equipping young people to turn their passion into policy wins. So I'm very excited to be here and thank you all so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And last but not least, Suzanne Herman.
Hi, everyone. My name's Suzanne Herman. I serve as the legal director of Period Law, which is a national legal and advocacy nonprofit devoted to all things menstrual equity. Our main goals in the 3 years we've been in operation has been eliminating the sales tax on menstrual products in all 50 states and ensuring adequate access to menstrual products in schools through watching the implementation of laws like the one in Illinois. We are a national org, but I'm born and raised Chicagoan, so it's particularly special for me to get to be here today and speak about Illinois. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to have all of you. Let's go ahead and get started. My first question is for all of you. How did you first become interested in advancing menstrual equity? Representative Hernandez, if you don't mind, we'd like to start with you.
Of course. Well, I was appointed back 6 years ago to this position. And when I was doing a tour of different nonprofits, I actually went to a food pantry. Talking to a food pantry, they talked to me about, of course, different obstacles that they faced when it came to the food. But one of the obstacles became menstrual hygiene products. And they kind of shine that light of the situation that they have seen when it comes to families not being able to purchase these items, not able to have access to these products at all. And many students would not go to school. So, and I would hear terrible, terrible stories about how menstruators would use this one-time use product like a pad and use it again, reuse it after washing it or so often. And it's, of course, that's a public health issue that could lead to a lot of infections and unsanitary. So it just made me very upset to hear this. And I realized that I had a privilege. I had a privilege in my own family that my family was able to have these products accessible to myself. I never really questioned um, how I received these or how much it would cost because they were always available. But I know that a lot of families might not be able to, and they have to pick and choose what products they might have to pick. So that's how I kind of started getting involved. And after that, every year I try to present a bill when it comes to menstrual hygiene and making sure that we slowly get to that goal of making sure these products are everywhere.
Yeah, that's all awesome. I think that's definitely relatable, especially on my end. Hamsika, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, so I first got interested in menstrual equity through my own experiences being a student with a lack of accessibility to menstrual products, most notably the apparent lack of menstrual products in public restrooms for menstruators. From my experience, I first got my period in like fourth grade in the school restroom, and I had no clue where I could begin to look or ask for products. And as time went on, I just learned more about the broad scope of how much menstrual inequity is everywhere. And it's not just schools, it's in public restrooms everywhere. And it was larger than just my elementary school bathroom. And it drove me to want to make a change towards menstrual equity so that everyone can have access to menstrual products because it's a basic bodily function that we should have the access to have.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on board with that. And you're so passionate about it. Suzanne, how about you?
I first learned about this issue when I was in law school, and I was introduced to it via the tampon tax discrepancy and like the idea that this is a discriminatory sex-based tax that only half the population pays. And I think like both of the previous speakers mentioned, it's like this light bulb that goes off that you cannot turn away from, and that you just keep learning more and more about the fundamental inequity of how women are able to access menstrual products and all people who menstruate. So, like everyone else has said, I just couldn't really turn away. And it's, as you can see, changed the course of my legal career, which I'm very pleased and grateful for. And it's led to a lot of other issues of menstrual equity that can be addressed via legislation and legal advocacy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how about you, Sydney?
Yeah, I actually came to the issue of menstrual inequity and the ability to advance menstrual equity through my work and my background in K through 12 education policy. That was what my original focus was on. And I saw firsthand how access to resources in general impacted students and were a real make or break factor in their success, especially for those who come from low income communities, LGBTQ plus youth, and students of color, of course. And so, what started as a general interest in the factors that impact student outcomes became very focused on this fight for menstrual equity. And so, I'm really happy now that I get to still work with students and still work in that K through 12 space with a focus on making sure that they have access to the resources that they need to be successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys all came to this issue in a very different way, but we're glad that we have people like you advocating for it. Our next question is to Representative Hernandez. Rep. Hernandez, in 2021, you passed House Bill 156 requiring Illinois public schools to provide menstrual products in schools. What does the law entail, and why aren't private and charter schools included in the legislation? And what inspired you to file such a legislation?
Well, we go back to the story, right? I heard about what was going on and how these products were not available. And I went back to my own story too. I had my period when I was 13 and it was in school. Luckily, it was Halloween and I was wearing all black and nothing like nobody could tell, but I bled through my pants. And of course, like not knowing as a 13-year-old, like what's going on. My mom really didn't explain anything to me either. So she just said, hey, one day you're going to bleed. When that happens, come to me and I'll tell you what to do. But that was it. There was no discussion on what's going on, what's happening with your body, what this means. Here's some Tylenol, here's some chocolate or tea. It was just a simple, this is going to happen and we will figure it out. And because of that story, I realized there were a lot of people that might have the same situation that are going through in schools and not having these products. And reading more articles, I've noticed that a lot more menstruators are menstruating younger, right? I was 13, but there was a lot of menstruators are a lot younger than 13, as we've heard, fourth grade, right? And that is what kind of motivated me to get involved and making sure that we passed this legislation. I will say it was hard. It was a really hard legislation to pass because a lot of people did not understand. They were uncomfortable. They did not want to discuss this topic. I had a lot of male colleagues that came to me saying why, or they would turn red because they didn't know how to ask specific questions on this. But it was very important to continue the work and making sure the public schools had this, right? The public schools are funded statewide. They're getting property taxes and so on. So I felt like public schools was the way to go at the moment. Private schools was going to be a little bit more difficult because of religious backgrounds, and I did not want to tap into that at that moment, especially because this bill itself would be in all bathrooms in public schools, including male bathrooms. So it was already challenging enough to get it through, and I can only imagine putting a religious component to it. And I hope to one day get to that point that I can maybe amend it, But right now, this is the bill that we were able to do. And there's a challenges with this bill too. The bill itself, as we saw with the poll, a lot of schools are not following the law. A lot of schools are not including these products, and many state that it's because students will vandalize the bathroom with it. But my response to that, and I remember going to school, students would use toilet paper to vandalize the school. So I don't see the schools taking the toilet paper away. But they are taking these products that are needed, that should be close by inside the bathroom, to not only cut time from someone having to go to the nurse's office and say, hey, I need a pad or I need a tampon, and then go back to the bathroom. And then after that, you might be missing 5 or 10 minutes of school time. Like, let's just have those products there and let's trust our students to do the right thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really inspiring. Our next question is for Sydney and Suzanne. How does Illinois compare to other states in terms of our law, and what more can be done to advance menstrual equity here in Illinois? Let's go ahead and start with Sydney.
Great. Yes, of course. First off, thank you so much to Representative Hernandez for introducing this bill and moving it forward. I know Suzanne can also testify that in other states, sometimes just finding an author can be the most challenging part of this process, someone who's willing to have these conversations and to be a champion on this issue. So thank you so much for your work, and to all the advocates here today who have put in that work and talking to their representatives as well. But Illinois is ahead of the game, right? By requiring these free period products in school bathrooms at all. We know that there are 27 states plus DC that actually have any sort of access laws like this on the books. And so there is a lot of work to be done. I am calling in from Austin, Texas today. And so I am saying that Texas is one of those states that still has a lot of work to be done. And so we are grateful that this conversation is even happening, because this is how we break the stigma. This is how we continue to advance the issue of menstrual equity, is by having the conversation and normalizing it. And students and people who menstruate and those who don't but are learning, right? We can't normalize that unless it's out in this public space. And so we're very grateful for that. We also know that from those 27, 9 of those states have enacted laws that both require and fund those free period products in schools. And what we're seeing more and more of, and once again, Suzanne, who's an incredible partner of Period with Period Law, can also testify that implementation is sometimes the biggest fight, right? We passed this bill and it is room for celebration. It is an opportunity for us to celebrate this movement and the work that everyone has put in. But then we come into a space where schools are not compliant for many reasons. That could be a lack of guidance or technical assistance, a lack of direct funding, a lack of accountability from the state or whatever agency or body is overseeing that. And so that is sort of this next frontier. We've done a lot of the really hard work of getting here, of passing that bill, but now working on maybe strengthening some of that existing policy by making sure that we're communicating not just the legislative intent, but taking that all the way through to implementation. And we've seen community organizations filling the gap. I mean, She Votes Illinois, their menstrual equity toolkit is a phenomenal example of that. We see that in other states like California and Oregon. Minnesota actually will be releasing their toolkit in the coming days. And so it's a really exciting opportunity that states have to ensure that they are aligned on this legislative priority, and that they're able to make sure that students are feeling tangible outcomes of this bill. And so, yeah, and I'm sure Suzanne has more to say on that as well with their work.
Absolutely. Well, you've said a lot of it, and yeah, we work a lot in tandem on this issue. And another partner that we often work with, who has a fantastic resource that I'm putting here in the chat, is the Alliance for Period Supplies. They have this map which shows exactly what Sydney was mentioning, some states that don't have a requirement, some that is funded and unfunded, that being like the biggest bucket that we can kind of see plays directly into implementation for obvious reasons. But there are a lot of other smaller or not as immediately noticeable ways in which Illinois' law compares to other laws around the state. Period law, we did a kind of project 2 years ago now somehow, where we asked all the states that currently had this law, we filed Freedom of Information Act requests for all of the publicly available documentation about these laws. And so that we could see from firsthand primary source documents how these laws were being implemented or in some cases not implemented. So obviously funding was a way in which states differentiated themselves, but also delineation of responsibilities, which is something that Illinois is particularly good at. I believe there was a follow-up bill in 2024 specifically delineating who needs to be stocking these products in Illinois. And that's something that we're not seeing in other states, which absolutely has to be a positive and make a difference. And I think, as Sydney said, the biggest difference that we see in Illinois that puts it well ahead of the game is just involved and proactive advocates. It should not be She Votes Illinois' job to make a menstrual equity handbook, but the fact that it was made and it's beautiful and it's correct and it provides resources is head and shoulders above states that, even if they want to, even if they are providing funding, are not able to do, because it's not, a slight against departments of education, famously underfunded, underrecognized departments. It's a lot of times this wants to happen and we just can't see it happen. I lived for many years in New York, and I think I'm going to speak a little later on the panel about kind of the test subject that is New York City, because that was the first jurisdiction to ever have a law of this nature. But we can measure success in a lot of different ways, not just monetary. It's also just the feet on the ground and the commitment to figuring this out, even if it takes many years. As Representative Hernandez mentioned, her legislation is truly groundbreaking, and she did what she could do and will continue to work on it to make it the best legislation that it can be.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much to the both of you. Our next question is to Hamsika. Hamsika, what have been your experiences with the schools that you've attended in adhering to this law? What's the reality in schools today, and what impact does noncompliance have for students, especially marginalized groups?
Yeah, so as I previously mentioned, the first time I got my period was before HB 156 was even passed. But even after HB 156 was passed, I still faced menstrual inequity and the lack of access to menstrual products in my school. So I've gone to both a public school and a charter school. And within public schools, there was just a lack of dispensers in general for menstrual products. And sometimes there wouldn't even be like they would not have like the container at all, or if they had the container, they like in my charter school, they would not be regularly filled or regularly including both pads and tampons in those dispensers. And at that moment, I would have to force myself, it would be forcing me to go out of my way to miss more of my class time and more of my other classmates' class time to go to the nurse's office or go all the way back to just a class. And I have nothing else that I can do. And especially for other public schools, I know that they don't include menstrual products in all restrooms. And so that is a huge inaccessibility to all students to be able to access menstrual products. So that's something that has been forcing students to go out of their way to miss more class and take away time from their learning. And that's something that I've noticed even after the law.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. As a student myself, I'll just quickly bounce off that. In my public school, we rarely have products stocked in our restrooms. So, just like you said, I have to normally travel all the way down to the nurse, and typically in the nurse's office are low quality products, and they're always all the way in the back. So, you have to interact with like several people in order to get them, and that can be frustrating. And my school also has 3 floors, so it's pretty much the worst thing ever whenever I get my period when I'm on the top floor and have to walk all the way downstairs. And I'd say it's honestly like a 10-minute round trip. And I just don't think that that's super acceptable. Thank you guys all so much. Now we're going to take a quick break from the panel to introduce our second poll question, which is a lack of access to menstrual products can cause urinary tract infections, increased susceptibility to cervical cancer, infertility, death, or all of the above. Okay, and it looks like we have our answers. The answer is all of the above. A lack of access to menstrual products can have very serious health consequences. Menstrual health is a public health issue, and when people are forced to use unsanitary materials or wear products for too long, it can lead to UTIs, reproductive health complications, and increased risk for cervical cancer due to chronic inflammation or infections. In extreme cases, it can contribute to fatal outcomes from untreated infections or toxic shock syndrome. Now, I'd like to resume our panelist questions. My next question is to all of you. How does a lack of access to menstrual products impact educational outcome, economic opportunity, and an overall well-being for menstruators in Illinois? Let's go ahead and start with Suzanne.
Well, I think that my colleagues might be, with their various expertise, might be better equipped to give stats and specific examples. But what I'll say is that from a legal point of view, what we're always looking for at Period Law is to hear those stories from students and parents and teachers and nurses themselves. Because when we pull legal levers, whether it be in legislation or in lawsuits, what we absolutely need is that firsthand account and that self-reported data. So one of the bravest and most important things that people who want to get involved in this space can really do is just speak up about their personal experiences, whether it be economic, educational, well-being, all of these types of things. I think that sometimes people think, okay, the research is being done elsewhere, or people know these stats or these numbers. There's hard data attached to it, but this is still an extremely new thing to be speaking about publicly. So I just want to encourage everyone to kind of self-report to the extent that they're able and willing. It can be sensitive, but it changes if we just keep the pressure on it. But as to the numbers and figures, I'll turn it over to the educational experts.
Yeah, awesome. Sydney, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, definitely. Echoing Suzanne's sentiments of the power of telling your story. So many times, I have the opportunity to speak with legislators about the work that we're doing at the national level. But what I find to be most impactful, and oftentimes what builds this connection and this foundation for the work that we do in that state or even at the federal level, right, is those personal stories and the people who've been deeply impacted by the issue. And so I'm grateful to all the young people who are brave and courageous. I know that when I got my period, I was in fourth grade and I was not that brave or courageous to have conversations about it with anyone. And so I'm amazed every day by the people who are able to use that story to advance this cause. But as it relates to some of those numbers and statistics that Suzanne was referencing, Period conducted what we call a state of the period study. And so we did that both in 2021 and in 2023. And in our most recent study, we found that 1 in 4 students who menstruate have experienced period poverty, which is the chronic lack of access to product and other considerations, right, in managing your period. And so we know that these students who are experiencing period poverty are also more likely to miss school, avoid activities, and experience shame or discomfort while they're at school, which can ultimately impact their success in the classroom. This is especially unfortunate, right, as someone with a background in K through 12 education policy and who's experienced all these factors that impact student outcomes, because we know that chronic absenteeism can have lifelong effects for students as they enter the workforce, on their lifelong earnings. So this is not just about students that are in the classroom. This is also people when they move into the workplace. For those who menstruate, not having access to products there as well. I did want to highlight something specific that is not from Illinois, but is actually been conducted over the past 2 years by Utah's Policy Project. They began tracking this data and information following the passage of HB 162 in their state. And it shows that 56% of students have attended school or extracurricular activities that they say they would have otherwise missed due to this lack of access to product. And so this new access that has been created by this bill has increased the number of students who are able to fully show up and be present in their school and in their activities. And we know from anecdotal evidence, right, from the stories that we're hearing from people through period positive workplace programs, the work we do at Period to encourage employers to provide products in their workplaces, that this is making a difference for those adults as well who are entering the workforce. And so I know the incredible impact that this is going to have in the state of Illinois, which is really exciting. And I hope and I know that the legislature and these advocates are doing all that they can to ensure that we're able to have this data in the state to hopefully continue to expand on the work that we're doing now.
Yeah, all of that information was really helpful, and that stat from Utah is super exciting. Hamsika, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, echoing off of Sydney, having a lack of access to menstrual products means for students it's missing time from learning and missing on them like focusing on their future and their education. And providing menstrual products means that we're allowing students to focus on their future rather than their basic bodily functions. And providing this accessibility and is part of reducing the stigma around periods as well, especially for all menstruators, not just girls, but it means that we're creating a more safe environment for all students to menstruate and increasing accessibility to menstrual products means that we're breaking down that stigma. We're allowing all students to feel safe, all menstruators to feel safe, and we're allowing them to focus on what's important, which is their future and not just their bodily functions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Representative Hernandez?
Well, I'll echo everything that you guys have said because it's very important. But I do want to share a little bit of a story when comes to work, right? And I know Sydney mentioned a little bit of also the work environment. So this year, I was in the Capitol. I was going to committee. I wasn't expecting my period, right? Unfortunately, it did it did come on a not the right time, and luckily I was wearing black again, but I did bleed through. I went to the nearest bathroom in the Capitol, and there was nothing. And I knew there was nothing, but I was still very upset because at this same year, I presented a bill to allow, to mandate that the state puts dispensers in all Capitol and Stratum building where we have our offices at, dispenser for free. And where we can have access to these products. In our building for our offices, we have that dispenser already, but it's always empty and it still charges you 25 cents. So it was very upsetting to see that. And I had heard, I think during that same week, that the bill was actually not going to get called because the Senate didn't want to call it, since this could be something that the Secretary of State could do on their own. So I was very upset because what happens if the Secretary of State doesn't want to do it? Luckily, we do have someone that is willing to do it. And I sent an email after my incident saying, hey, I almost missed my committee because of this. I was thinking I might have to go back home and change and then come back. That was going to create a bigger issue in my schedule. And these products should have already been there. And I know I'm not the only one. I remember that this year, too, I got a text from a friend who's a lobbyist and said, hey, I need a pad. Can you please walk to the Senate chambers and give me a pad? And I had to do that. And I gladly did that for her. But I didn't want to because these products should already been in those bathrooms. So because of that, I'm just very excited that we are now having these products in the bathrooms now, and I can't wait to go to Springfield and see this happen. But I hope not to have the same incident ever again. If I do, then the products are going to be there. And that's what makes me very happy to hear. I'm very happy to just see that we're moving somewhere. And even with the governor's office and the mansion, they added these products on their own and even apologized to me saying, hey, I'm sorry, we should have had these a long time ago. I don't know what we were thinking. So it's great to know that slowly people are starting to take more into consideration and adding these products on their own without needing me to put a legislation on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much. Our next question is going to be for Suzanne. How is period law taking action to ensure schools are adhering to the law?
Absolutely. So I spoke briefly about our Freedom of Information Act project. We are still going through the data that's coming back from that and just trying to publish it and advertise it and share it as needed because that's information that it took a lot of like legal legwork to get, but it's for the people and it's for the advocates and constituents of every state. And then we've had a more streamlined approach in New York where period law is technically headquartered and where I was living at the time. New York, in 2016, just the city of New York, but a huge jurisdiction larger than some states, passed a law mandating products in schools. So that was the first one of its kind. And we are in 2023 by the time that reports of this law never working properly finally make their way back to the city council for an amendment. So period law had been involved in its previous iteration called period equity in getting that 2016 law passed. And over the years, we're hearing anecdotal evidence from students that the products are just not where they need to be. So finally, we were able to get an oversight hearing in the New York City Council to say, what is going on here? Why is this not happening? And an amendment was eventually passed, which expanded the law to, it used to be 6th grade to 12th grade. It was expanded to be 4th grade to 12th grade, as Representative Hernandez's bill is, because that's what's recommended by the science in this area. It also implemented a reporting mechanism so that every July, New York City is supposed to report what schools are getting products and which ones are not. There was an educational curriculum component, some other small components. We changed the language from feminine hygiene products to menstrual products, something that has always been really important to me because that's just such a misnomer and kind of a strange use of the word hygiene, in my opinion. So then that next July, we had period law. We were really looking forward to seeing the first report of its kind dictating how products were being distributed and to see, we had a suspect that it was going to be different in outer boroughs or in different economically advantaged neighborhoods. And New York produced that report in 2024 for the first time and said it was 100% in compliance with the law. So as a lawyer, that's like kind of something you dream of because it's incorrect. And we filed suit about 3 months later with a very brave student, anonymized, sued on her behalf against the city of New York, saying this law is not being implemented. We're seeing false reporting coming out of New York City. And it was exciting, but it should not have ever reached that point. No one should have to put their name on a legal document to say, I bled through my clothes and I was in school and I have to advocate for myself in this way. However, I really think it has the potential to be trend setting for other places around the country. And what it also says to the entire country is that we're not just going to pass these laws and then dust our hands off and say that we're done. We're going to keep monitoring them. We're going to keep speaking to students. Students are going to keep advocating for themselves, whether or not we're here to help them with it or not. So it's still ongoing. You can follow our progress at periodlaw.com, but .org, excuse me. But it's just an example of there being many different levers to pull in this fight. The on the ground advocacy, passing amendments, passing first enacting legislation is one of them. Press is another one that's been really important in the fight in New York because we've gotten some really good attention on this issue because of the lawsuit. And then there's legal challenges. So yeah, stay tuned. We don't want to have to do that in Illinois. We don't want to be adversarial. We want to be collaborative. But yeah, here we are.
Yeah, all of that is so good to know. Our next question is for Representative Hernandez. What's the next for menstrual equity legislation in Illinois? Are there any bills that attendees can support now?
Not yet, but soon. So in the past, like I said, I've done at least 4 bills now when it comes to menstrual hygiene, creating increasing the access. I do want to start targeting local governments, especially their buildings like city halls, county buildings, anything that individuals have access to, the public has access to. I want to make sure we find ways to have these products there. So that's one of my goals. But my big goal that I did try to test it out, I think 2 years ago, is to have menstrual hygiene products everywhere in small businesses and libraries and everywhere. Just have them all over Illinois. So that is the biggest goal. Eventually, hopefully, I'll get to that. But for now, I'll start making little bits and pieces of bills that can lead to that big goal. But also, I would love to. I know we've been working on something when it comes to education and making sure that there's proper education on what exactly is a period, what is menstruating, and what are some things that individuals might need to know. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, there's a lack of information. I know a lot of male men and male counterparts don't really understand what a period is, and they just tend to stereotype, right? I think we have all listened to, oh, you must be in your period, you're so emotional, or maybe this is why you're upset, and they go towards those comments, passive aggressive comments, instead of just trying to understand what we might be dealing with, and that it might not even be related to periods at all. But it's, even if we are in our period, that it does take a toll on our bodies, especially the first few days. And all menstruators are different. So everyone has a different experience. It could be a very painful experience for most of the individuals, or some of them might be a very short-term period cycle, right? But I think we also need to talk about potentially sick days, using sick days as when it comes to menstrual hygiene and menstrual opportunities out there for employment, and taking those into consideration. I know for me, the first 2 days are terrible. I'm pretty much almost at a fetal position because it's so awful. So I'm always taking Tylenol, or just trying to, continue the work that I do. But if I had the ability to take a day off, I would love to take a day off, just to be able to sit down and take some tea and just get through what my body's going through right at that moment. So there's a lot of things, a lot of legislation in mind, but hopefully we'll slowly get there.
Yeah, we definitely look forward to seeing what is next. I'd just like to take this time to remind everybody that if you have any questions at all, feel free to post them in the chat. Our next question is for all of our panelists. We can go ahead and start with Hamsika. Can you please share a success story where your advocacy led to real policy change in your community or through your organization?
Yeah, so through my work with She Votes Illinois and as a board member, I have been able to work with all of the amazing board members alongside She Votes Illinois and create the Menstrual Equity Handbook, which details how schools and its school administrators and teachers can adhere to HB 156 and to provide menstrual products properly in the restrooms in their schools, and it details alongside that why menstrual equity is important, how and why we need them in the bathrooms themselves. Alongside the menstrual equity handbook, we also created a student parent handbook, basically detailing it's basically a toolkit for students and parents and community members to advocate for menstrual equity in their schools, to make sure that we hold schools accountable, and that way we can move towards menstrual equity, and that way and we can use that menstrual equity handbook and be as a guide for schools and be like, this is what we need to be doing, and empowering students and parents to fight for menstrual equity as well. So that's something that's really exciting that She Votes Illinois is doing, and we hope that you all check out the handbook and the student parent handbook as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next, we'd love to hear from Rep. Hernandez.
I would say two. One, seeing those products in the bathrooms. That's a very, I feel very proud of that when I see that. Even if it's not a bill that I passed, but people are starting to take action, it's great. And number two is moments like this, like meetings and Zooms, conversations that we're having. It's great because I know maybe in the past, maybe people were a little bit hesitant to discuss it, and now like we talk about it, and I'm very comfortable sharing a lot of things to my colleagues about this, and to make them uncomfortable, but that's how we get to the policy making. We have to make people uncomfortable to get something done. And I love that we're educating others and people are joining today to just ask questions, learn more about what's going on, and also hopefully they don't feel alone, right? That there's other people that are going through similar stories or similar obstacles, and hopefully this would motivate people to help us create more policy, because I need your help. I really do. I can't do this alone.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have loved hearing from you. Sydney, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I feel very, very fortunate to work for a youth-led organization because every single day I have the opportunity to talk to young people whose advocacy is doing exactly that, like enacting this policy change in their community, whether they're introducing a proclamation in their city council or they're introducing a bill in their state legislature. Each of them are doing something that is really impactful for the movement. It is hard to choose just one story, but I think one of my recent favorites that is continuing to develop on the implementation side, like we talked about, comes out of California with their Know Your Period bill, which is AB 2229, in case anyone is curious. But this legislation was actually born from a community advocate named Shreya, who was also a trustee for the Solano Community College in that area. She submitted it as a part of a contest called There Ought to Be a Bill or something, some similar title. And it was selected. And so, in partnership with Assemblywoman Lori Wilson, they developed this legislation. It received bipartisan support in the legislature, passed, and was eventually signed into law in 2024. And it requires California public schools to provide comprehensive menstrual health education as a part of their sex ed curriculum. And so this is such a crucial step in what we're talking about, right? Normalizing talking about your period and your menstrual cycle, educating students on their bodies, but also how we utilize these products as well. Because exposure is only one part of it, right? Having these discussions, ensuring that they're used in a safe way, and educating them is really crucial. And so this story is definitely not Shreya is unique in the sense that like she really went for it, and we're so grateful for her advocacy. But there are so many other stories like hers, and so if you're a young person who has an idea for a bill in the menstrual equity space, but of course also outside of it, I want you to know that it is so possible. And I think Representative Hernandez here is a phenomenal example of someone listening to their community and wanting to fill that gap and meet that need. So I encourage you all to pursue that advocacy as well.
Yeah, what an inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing it. We'll go ahead and finish up with Suzanne.
Sure. Like Sydney, I have a lot of favorite stories, and the one out of New York, although it's maybe not a success yet, but soon, is one. But a very recent one is Missouri just passed its exemption for menstrual products from the sales tax. And so the last day that you'll ever pay sales tax for menstrual products in Missouri is coming up, I believe, on August 28th. So that's like a really recent win. And a law student that we worked with at Mizzou, she worked with us she asked for a refund to the state for paying this tax. It was like 97 cents or something. But she like went through all of the formal legalized steps to confront that tax. And with some press, with amazing on the ground advocates and like wonderful legislators who had been working on this for years also, it was this perfect storm. And they were able to pass this law this year. It's a Republican-led state, which is a lot of the ones that are left for the menstrual tax issue. So it's just a really beautiful thing to see it come to fruition like that, and for it to be obviously not a partisan issue, which some people sometimes like to label it as. But this was a great example of like all these different worlds coming together to get it done. And only a couple more days, it will be law.
Thank you so much to all of you for sharing that. It definitely leaves a lot of hope in this realm. I'd like to thank you all so much. And now we'll transition to taking questions from the audience. And it looks like the one that we have is, why do menstrual products need to be in boys' bathrooms? I think I'll go ahead and direct this to Representative Hernandez. And then if anybody else has anything they'd like to add, feel free to bounce off of her.
Of course. So, of course, we're seeing, there's a lot of menstruators, and we use the term menstruators because there's a lot of individuals that are transitioning to males, right? So this is helpful for those that are transgenders, identify as transgender, are going through the change. But I know that in schools there is a little bit more politically involvement, and unfortunately got in the way from that. So a lot of people stopped putting those dispensers and in the bathrooms because of that. And I've received a lot of angry messages from a lot of parents, a lot of people because of this. But I think this is very important because a lot of students need to feel comfortable. They're already taking a big jump, change in their life, and they don't need to be excluded from the products that they need, right? So this is something that I want to make sure that is there. And in the Capitol, we wanted to also include it in the male bathrooms. However, that was a little bit more of a jump because of my colleagues, and unfortunately would not be able to support that. And a lot of people did not want to have open that can of worms again of that discussion that created a lot of political ugliness in our campaigns and our debates, and overall people just saying very bad things about individuals. But I hope that one day we can get to that point where we can have menstrual hygiene products in all bathrooms, especially as we're seeing a lot more younger individuals going through gender affirming care and just transgender changes.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. If nobody has anything else to add, I think I will go ahead and introduce our She Votes Illinois board member, Shrutilaya Muthakumar, to share with us how we can keep this momentum going with some important calls to action. Leah, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Reva, and thanks everyone for being here today and our amazing panelists. It has been really inspiring hearing what you have to say about menstrual inequity. To share a little bit briefly about me, I am a rising high school senior, and menstrual inequity, the issue came up to me in my most recent trip to India when I visited my family, where I heard some pretty insane stories about how they used to live as menstruators. And it was especially evident in my own community when I came back. And that's what pushed me to join She Votes Illinois. And I've been really excited to help plan this event for everyone today. So I'm going to go ahead and share a couple of calls to action that are going to kind of serve as a guiding point for what you can do after this meeting to help you stay more informed with the community and support menstrual equity in Illinois. Firstly, we ask that you share our menstrual equity handbook. We created a practical, easy-to-use menstrual equity handbook designed specifically for Illinois public schools. It's an amazing tool to help ensure students have access to the products they need, no questions asked. We're asking you to read it and share it with your school administrators. This simple action can have a real lasting impact. And if you know students at other schools, share it with them as well. Next, we ask you to use the student parent advocacy one-pager. Whether you're a student or a parent, this one-pager gives you the tools you need to make change in your own community. It's available in both English and Spanish. It's short, clear, and very easy to share. Next, we ask that you support menstrual product legislation. Policy change is one of the most powerful ways we can ensure equity, and there are a few bills that you can support. In Illinois, we have HB 2783. This bill requires free menstrual products in all state and local government buildings, including school district buildings. And you've heard Rep. Hernandez talk about this today. We also have federal bills, the Menstrual Equity for All Act, and then the Period Proud Act. Even if you can't vote yet, you still have a right to make your voice heard with your representatives. Next is to host or donate to a menstrual product drive. Another great way to get involved is by hosting a menstrual product drive at your school or in your community. This is something that I personally want to do in my school next school year. Our Menstrual Equity Toolkit provides you with a quick guide to run a successful drive to support those in need. Next is to register to vote or help get out the vote. Voting is one of the most powerful tools we have to create systematic change. Even if you're not old enough to vote yet, there are still ways to get involved in Illinois. If you're 16 or 17 and have a driver's license, you're automatically pre-registered to vote, unless you opt out. You can also pre-register online through the Illinois State Board of Elections. Check out our Illinois voting info guide for teens to learn more. Your voice matters at school, in your community, and especially at the ballot box. Finally, I wanted to share that you can connect with She Votes Illinois to stay involved and informed. Be sure to check out our menstrual equity toolkit on our website. It has all the info I just shared and more. Follow us on our socials at SheVotesIL, join our mailing list, and if you have questions or want to partner with us, you can reach out to us at info@shevotesil.org. Everything we posted in the chat so you can keep track of things, and you'll have access to everything I spoke about after this meeting. There are so many ways to take action, and it doesn't take much to make a real difference. Whether it's having a conversation with your principal, organizing a product drive, or sharing a one-pager with a friend, it all matters. So thank you again for being here and being a part of this movement. Back to you, Veda.
Thank you so much, Leah. Like Leah said, there are a lot of ways to get involved, and I encourage each and every one of you to choose something to channel everything you've learned from this panel today into activism in your community. Like Leah said, all of these are linked in the chat, and we'd really love to see you engage with them. Thank you all for joining us. We hope that you feel informed and empowered, and let's work together to make menstrual equity a reality for every student in Illinois. Thank you all so much for your time tonight. We hope that if you have any questions, you'll go ahead and post them in the chat, or if you want to stay behind a couple of minutes to ask, that would be great. But thank you so much for giving us your night. Have a great night.
Thank you so much for your time, all of our panelists.